Is it game time yet? Is it game time yet? We're getting closer. Getting closer to the Philadelphia Union having a game this Saturday. It is a battle of unbeaten teams. Two undefeated teams squaring off Saturday as the Philadelphia Union hosts back at home finally at Subaru Park. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about some other updates around Cavin Sullivan and the team. Welcome to PHLY Union Podcast. We've got JP Zapata, myself, Renee Washington, bringing you this update on the team. So, JP, we've got the news. The Philadelphia Union announced on Thursday that they're going to be resuming their game versus the Seattle Sounders. That will take place April 30th. It's a Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, the game will pick up from the 6-minute mark, which is where they got to before that Saturday monsoon that had the game postponed. So we do have a date on that rain date, I should say, of the rescheduling of the Seattle-Philly game. That in itself is very exciting news to hear and know exactly when it's going to be going down. Typically, MLS games are Saturday or Sunday, mostly Saturday night, drifting into Sunday morning at like midnight. So Tuesday, I feel like makes total sense, and glad also it's pretty early in the season that we're just a month away from when that game's going to be getting replayed.
Yeah, absolutely. What is going on, everyone? I appreciate everyone tuning on in here to today. Obviously, we're doing a little bit of a pre-record. It's a hectic week with the Gargano show starting off, and obviously, Renee has Philly's opening day as well, so we do appreciate everyone hanging tight here as we give you guys this pre-record here. But no, so look, obviously, that was one thing we were looking for. That was an absolutely wild situation, which you almost had to deal with the Phillies as well with a potential monsoon rain out. But yeah, so April 30th will be the next, will be the rescheduling here for Union versus Seattle. One thing to note, Renee, is that the Union will actually have a game on April 27th against our RSL. So we'll have a game at home against RSL, which is obviously it's big that you're going to be at home still. But now 3 days later, you have to prepare for 84 minutes against the Seattle Sounders, which never is easy. But we finally got this date. It was one of the weirdest situations in Union history, to be honest with you. But we got the date. We'll be able to see, and we'll preview as such. But that's going to be a big week here for the Union. I'm just making sure we don't have a midweek match because you know how that goes too. So now we have 2 weeks before it. So Atlanta United on April 14th, and then on April 27th, you have RSL. So that looks to be the week there for the U.
Yeah, looks like it's going to be a good stretch for them. You know, it should time-wise should make complete sense for them to be able to add that Tuesday game in pretty seamlessly. As you mentioned, it has been a wild week for us as well. It's been an exciting week at that. If you guys hadn't had a chance to check out JP on the Gargano show as one of the producers and co-hosts, JP and Andrew Fraser are helping to produce the show. Also just being a part of, you know, being able to bring Cuz back to the city. The Anthony Gargano show launched Thursday morning. I know you guys did some great tutorials almost of like how to watch, where to watch, but you guys can check that out Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 a.m. on YouTube. If you miss it live, it is on podcast platforms, because here at PHLY, we want to make sure we can give you guys all the up-to-date news, stories, you know, things going on with all of our Philly sports here every single day, whether it's live with us on YouTube or digitally listening back. So thanks for tuning in with us here to be able to check out these updates, because as mentioned on the other side, of course, we had a Phillies postponement. Now, I was one, because of the Philadelphia Union, I was scarred from that Seattle game.
Right.
So I was actively saying I wanted the Phillies to postpone the game to Friday. Friday's weather, sunny, and I've learned from the monsoon of the Union that sometimes it's better to just go and make that executive decision early, even if, of course, it ends up not raining at all. But that's a whole other story and a whole other topic. So that being said, we've got the date for April 30th, Union Sounders, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, kicking off at the 6-minute mark. We also have, of course, the news, the game coming up this weekend versus Minnesota. That's a nice early start for us that we get kicking off at 2 p.m. That we get a nice Saturday afternoon. I know people were excited about the chance to be able to watch the game during the day.
Right. Saturday's going to be a big day. Obviously, the Union are playing in the afternoon games at Subaru Park are the best. And then, of course, the Phillies, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey throwing out the first pitch. Super excited. You got the Flyers playing on Saturday night. So it's going to be a busy Saturday here in Philadelphia for all the Philadelphians here. So it should be a lot of fun. But Renee, we got to talk about Cavin Sullivan.
Yeah, before we even get into the preview, let's talk Cavin Sullivan because the 14-year-old, the deal, as my AirPods died, because for anybody that doesn't know, before the show started, all my technology is dead, including my AirPods apparently. So in the middle, I just had a boop, boop. It's fine. Everything's fine. This is fine. So we did get the news. 14-year-old Cavin Sullivan signed an iconic deal, the largest deal of any homegrown player. Now, for him to be linked to Manchester City, which we had been talking about on the show in the past, that in itself was exciting. You know, the news that it wasn't going to happen right away. He can't officially actually play with the team until he turns 18. And now with that, the Union are in the middle of a major soccer story.
Yeah.
Being able to develop one of the best future talents in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And at 14 years old, which is even bizarre to be talking about a superstar 14-year-old when we still have so much to see from him, it is great to see that, you know, the Philadelphia Union, it just, I think, is a great opportunity to showcase and highlight how they develop players, you know, how they can help these homegrowns be able to have strong soccer careers, whether with the Union on the senior team or maybe outside of the MLS, like Cavin Sullivan. So exciting news for the Sullivan family that Cavin just, you know, officially has the terms and details where he'll be playing with Manchester City at the age of 18. And before then, at 16, he'll be able to be on loan. And so the trajectory is in place now for the future for Cavin Sullivan. It's a bright one, JP. Very bright future for Cavin.
Yeah, Renee, and any way you kind of look at this is such a positive. So, like, you know, we were discussing it on one of our episodes, and you brought up the great point. Like, this is a 14-year-old kid that we are talking about here. So the development in his future, just as a kid, is so important, just allowing him to be a kid. And on the flip side, look, we talked about another part about this youth academy, the homegrown system here in Philadelphia. It's been great. But since Brendan and since Mark have been here, what have we really sold off that's been, you know, making a statement over in Europe? So right now you have about 4 years. You have 4 years of Cavin Sullivan. In these 4 years, Cavan's going to be able to develop. And what better way to, you know, put some more name to this youth academy by preparing this kid before he goes to Manchester City? Look, remember, he was the original proposal was he was going to play like a year or two in Belgium at 16.
Correct.
And now he gets to stay here till 18. That is humongous. So in this time period, we continue his development. He gets to be a kid. He gets to be around his family. Obviously, Quinn's future is up in the air because my man's balling out right now. So we don't know what his future looks like. But he gets to stay here, which is super important. And I mean, selfishly, Renee, can we see Cavin Sullivan playing for the Union even for a couple matches, a la Cristiano Ronaldo with Lisboa back in the day? I mean, that would be really cool to see one or two matches. But the most important part about this is he's going to be able to stay here and be a freaking kid. And I love that.
Yes. Instead of having to worry about 2 years from now going to make a move internationally and then playing again 2 years later with Manchester City, it's phenomenal. I think it's a great way to best marriage his talents with his future instead of, you know, rushing him too quickly and giving him an idea of like, okay, now you know what you're working towards. And listen, let's be honest. I think the biggest change is it solidifies what you're working towards. Even if there was no deal, with how talented he is, and this goes for every player, you play and you train and you get better with the expectation you're going to get a professional contract. You just don't know when that professional contract is going to happen. And we saw his Union 2 debut, gets an assist, you know, big assist in a game-winning goal. But then also, you now have the idea of knowing what your future is. And I think for many people, they might say, oh, yeah, he's only 14, this, that, and the third. But let's be honest, I think the biggest thing that changes is it's now, instead of you having faith that that major contract is coming, you now know that that major contract is coming, and you still can work and progress towards it. With or without that deal with Man City, he was going to be training at a level to play, you know, international, to play with the biggest clubs around the world. It's now just knowing exactly where you're going to be in 4 years, which there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that certainty of knowing what your future holds and where you're going to be playing in the future.
Yeah, one thing we do need to shut down here is the Euro snob take here. And the Euro snob take is that wanting him to go to Manchester City as quick as possible. Like, one thing I just don't understand, Renee, is like, I get it. You like better quality soccer. You wake up early on Saturdays. You watch Premier League. That's respect to you, right? But like, if you are a Euro fan, still supporting the U.S. men's national team, Cavin Sullivan staying here and finishing his development here in the United States is extremely important here. And listen, if Cavin goes out and balls out in Manchester City, you know, 5-10 years down the line, where did he come from? Philadelphia. It's
Exactly.
important. It's important for all of these markets here. So it's extremely important, not only for him, but for the team and honestly for the future of our sport here in this country. So I think it just bodes well for every party here.
It does. It does. And, my last thing on it is to echo kind of your point. If anybody's, of course, there's frustration. People want him to stay with the Union. But if he has the talent and the ambition and the aspirations to play bigger, why cage him?
Bless you.
Thank you. I don't know where that came from. Why cage him to just being with the Union? Allow him to flourish. Allow him, exactly as you mentioned, how great is it to be able to say in the future, as whether it's from a marketing standpoint or even just to showcase the benefits of the Philadelphia Union product and development program, is to be able to say you have the Aronson brothers, the Sullivan brothers, Mark McKenzie. Like, it only adds that now there are going to be more players that want to play with the Union because they know the trajectory of, the best players that have come through it. So yes, I think short term, I can understand wanting to see him, especially if he's going to be this good. I'd love to see him with the senior team.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him have 10 years that he plays with Philadelphia Union. That's not really practical. Most guys in the MLS, specifically with the Union, you don't get that. They usually end up going somewhere else. So I'd rather him go somewhere else, be happy, playing at a level that he feels like fits him, and also be able to say proudly, he's from the Philadelphia Union. Proudly, this is where he got his starts, and this is what helped him take that next step in his career. But as we're talking about taking next steps, JP, as we know, and as we talked about in our show earlier this week live, the Union clearly took some next steps in that 3-1 victory over Portland last week. And now we're hoping those steps can continue against Minnesota in that Saturday afternoon, thankfully, Saturday afternoon game going up against Minnesota. It is now a battle of two teams that are undefeated. You've got Minnesota, who has 3 wins and a tie with no losses to their name, and then the Union, who have 1 win and 3 ties with no losses to their ledger. So there's a lot to look for. And I think the first thing I noticed about this Minnesota team, and even looking at their win over LAFC, is this is not the same Minnesota team as the past. They've done a really good job of really just kind of coming into this season and having this almost underdog mentality, grinding out games, competing, their movement, they're pesky, they're aggressive, they work hard. A number of their goals have come in the later minutes of the game, where they're not, it's game's not over. They're playing from the first whistle to the last whistle. And I do feel like when you look across the changes that they've made, the Loons are a team that you actually have to keep an eye on. This is going to be the toughest challenge for the Philadelphia Union, especially because of the confidence they're playing with, and they're not really playing with any pressure. I don't think many people may have expected them to have this start, and to see them surprise LAFC in the way they did, really put them on the map even more, to solidify them as a team that you have to keep an eye on. But they've got a lot of great talent, and they also have a new head coach in Eric Ramsey that's coming in. You can see the change of the culture of this team, and he was named to the MLS Best 11. Hassani Dotson was named to the MLS team. They're scoring goals, they're winning games, they're having fun, and it's still early in the season, yes, but they're off to a pretty strong start with their 3 wins so far.
Yeah, this Minnesota team is very interesting. I really don't know what to make of them. I do think that as we move forward in the season, I think that this will still be a team that will be in a playoff mix, but are they first in the Western Conference? That's where we're going to have to wait and see here. But they just got, like you mentioned, Eric Ramsey comes over from Manchester United. I mean, he's very young, but already pretty well decorated. And so this is now a test for him as he has his first job as the man leading a team here. And so far in one match, looked pretty good. We all know LAFC has a pretty daunting attack, and they were able to close that out. Minnesota United early on in the season, the 7th-ranked defense in the MLS with only allowing 4 goals and a +4 goal differential. So they're pretty well organized. Obviously, Dwayne St. Clair is a very talented goalie. I don't know if I would say top 5, but definitely top 10 for sure in the league, and he's still really young. And they seem to be pretty organized defensively. And then in the attack, I mean, look, if anyone knows me, Timo Pukki and FIFA, we go hand in hand. All right, I know Timo Pukki very well, and Renee, he's like that pesky striker that if you lose, because he's not the tallest guy in the world, but in the box he's pretty clinical. That's what he was doing at Norwich City in the Prem and the Championship as well. So if you give him that service, I mean, he's going to find a way to put the ball in the back of the net. And I think in his debut in the MLS, he had a hat trick. So he definitely is bound to put some goals. And obviously, Caden Clark is finding a little bit of a resurgence here after it didn't work out in Europe. He was supposed to be a wonder kid. It didn't work out. He's come over to Minnesota, may have found himself a spot here. But this Minnesota team early on have really just played well as a team. Obviously, Manuel Reynoso, who's been, back and forth with controversy, but he's still with this team. They had him as a bench piece against Minnesota. They have some depth as well. We're not the best at pronouncing names here, but Bongo Kuli Halawangwe, which is a South African player, is a great.
He goes by Bongo.
Okay, Bongo. Bongo is a great depth piece for Minnesota United. He had a goal against LAFC as well. Franco Fracopane, we've seen him here against Minnesota here in Philly too. So it's a team that honestly don't know what to make of, but I have to believe with the way the Union were playing against Portland, some of that magic has to continue because look, they were moving the ball very well and they got their opportunities and they played with that intensity that we talked about so well. And look, Eric Ramsey, great job in your first match. You have a promising future, but you're about to run into Jim Curtin, who just came off of a great clinical, tactical masterclass performance that he had against Portland. So this is going to be, honestly, Renee, this is going to be a lot of fun because there's some unknowns in this, and this could be an exciting match here in Subaru Park, depending on which side you're on.
Yeah, it's definitely looking like it's going to be a good one. It's definitely, as you mentioned, some extremely talented teams. Talented players across these two teams. You look at the 8 goals they've scored. You mentioned that +4 goal differential. The 8 goals they've scored have come from 6 different players. They've had a number of contributions, and as mentioned, 5 different players. Math. As mentioned, it's been late goals. Someone like Bongo comes off the bench for them. Yep. He's been in a role right now as a reserve that's coming and scored. You have Robin Ladd had a beautiful goal earlier this season. Timu Puki, who also is someone you have to keep an eye on. They've got a lot of talents because I feel like, have a lot of fight.
Yeah.
And as you were even alluding to and touching on with the changes that they've made, this is a group that's really out to, there's guys still winning spots. That in itself, that extra edge of what is their final 11 going to look like? I know as I was reading up on them and just kind of looking at their previous games, there's still a question mark because they have not locked in that starting 11. I think a team like the Philadelphia Union, that's something we've talked about where the Union typically do have the same 11 that they're running with. It's a little bit more predictable because they're running it back with the same group. That's not the case for Minnesota. There's still jobs up for grab, whether it's a starting role or off the bench role, which has this team as a hungry team that is out to prove their spot in the league, but their spot on the Loons. And so, Hassani is someone that they say plays with his hair on fire. He's all over the pitch. He's a big spark. He adds the attack. He creates. You also have, as I mentioned, Bongo, who's coming in, able to just score goals. The 2 goals he scored, huge goals at that. He's proven to be someone that's dangerous, that now as the game's progressing, maybe your backs are getting a little bit tired. Here's a spark coming off the bench, able to score. Of course, they also dealt with, like every other team, the international break. But they've got guys that are coming back that have had a chance to play together, that have, had a chance to go and have some success. So this is a very dangerous team to face for the Union, but I think it's a great time. It's a huge test. Coming off of that Portland win, you're going up against a Minnesota team that is trending upwards right now. They're on a hot streak for sure. And who's going to knock them off first? Don't know. There's only a handful of teams still undefeated across the league. These are 2 of them. And I think for the Union, this is probably the first time they're going into the game without expectation against a Minnesota team. Like, more pressure is on Minnesota in that sense because they do have those 3 big wins, including that LAFC, game that they had, putting up 2 goals on them.
Yeah.
1 early. So I do feel like there's more pressure on Minnesota than the Union, which actually should help them just go in, play freely, let the chips fall where they may, play some good soccer for 90 minutes or however long it ends up being, and see if you can, walk away with 3 points.
Yeah, one point I want to bring up here. So as we look at our U, right? So one player I'm going to keep an eye out for, obviously, as you mentioned, international break is over. So Daniel Gazdag is coming back from Hungary. I want to go over a little quote that I saw here from the soccergoal.com. So according to Marco Rossi, who is the manager of the Hungarian national team, he says, I do not like to talk about individuals, but I have to say that I expect more from Daniel Gazdag. He got his chance, but he didn't perform well tonight. either. So that was after their last match.
Mm.
And so, listen, that is some pretty telling stuff. Obviously, you and I have talked about Daniel Gazdag in this season. Like, we need more from him. So far this year, he has added 2 goals. But when you're talking about your DP number 10, and yeah, 2022, a lot of us, were literally yelling at the MLS for not putting him in the MVP conversation because a lot of us felt he was the MVP. And ever since that, Renee, like he's been on a downward spiral. And I don't know what it is because like you look at him, he's 20 years old. Like he still is in his prime. I mean, we haven't heard of any injuries. I mean, Jim hasn't talked about any injuries as
Right.
well. So I mean, the only thing I can think about is the mentals. Like, is everything okay? But like there are times where he does disappear out on that pitch. And so some of those comments are very telling. I don't know what to expect going forward here. But for Gazdag, we got to get out of this funk, and I don't know how you get out of it.
Yeah. First, I want to clarify it's not bongo, it's bongi with an I.
Bonky. Thank you.
Bongi. I'm still probably saying it incorrectly, but he's very talented. I watched their game. When you don't follow a team every day, it's hard to learn some of the
For
pronunciations.
sure.
But either way, he's talented. As for Daniel Gazdag, I do feel as though there's a huge mental component. And it is sad because when you look back, I know we were talking about it before the show in the office. When you look back, for him to be in the MVP category in that conversation and fall short of it, that for many athletes is motivation to get back and prove people wrong, prove that you belong to, be somebody that's the MVP, prove that you're deserving of the Golden Boot. He finished 7th in the Golden Boot last year, but the majority of his goals were off of penalty kicks. Show that 1 year is not an accident or a fluke, but that's who you are. And unfortunately, it feels like, exactly as the coach is mentioning and exactly as we've seen, he's disappeared. He's regressed. And he's only 28. He is very young. He may, obviously, much like everybody else, he's played a lot of soccer, but so has Julian Carranza. One of the biggest things for me is you look at Carranza compared to Gazdag, Julian's getting stuck in tackles. He obviously leads the offense in fouls, too. He's not afraid to play physical. He's not afraid to play aggressive. He's chasing people down. He's competing. I would love to see that from Gazdag. I'd love to see that from Ua, too. Mikel Ua was another one that I know I've talked about a lot. The two of them, I think, need a little bit more of that aggression and intensity instead of just kind of waiting for the game to come to them.
Yeah.
I'd love to see them play a little bit more on the front foot, more proactive, find the ball, find opportunities, create, make runs. You've got the green light to do so here. This is your team. It's just now up to you to step up and lead them. But right now it's been Quinn, Julian, even, of course, the backs that have been stepping up. It hasn't been two of the guys that you're expecting, your DP, your most expensive players on the team in terms of salary. So I'm hoping that whatever's going on there, Gazdag can work through it. I'd wonder if maybe he's also leaning in a bit too much to that narrative that he's only able to score off of penalty kicks and struggling in the run of play. He's got to find a way to simplify the game, get back to just playing hard, working hard, and having fun. And then I think from there, goals that's typically where they come from, when you're not overthinking it, when you're not putting that extra pressure on yourself. But JP, I know as we get ready to wrap up here, Saturday afternoon will be here before we know it. What are your thoughts on this game? I know last week we were all over the map. Technically, we were pretty accurate, though. I remember you mentioning the Union could score first and kind of pack it in. They scored first, scored second, scored third, and then packed it in. I felt like it could be 3-1, but I didn't know if it was going to be. I didn't think it was going to be 3-1 in favor of the Union. So we were accurate, just like teetering around being precise. What are your thoughts for this weekend's game? How do you think this is going to finish?
All right, so I know a lot of us forgot what afternoons in Chester, Pennsylvania are like, but from what I remember, they were always pretty damn good. So I do expect the Union to kind of show out here and send a little bit of a message here against a Minnesota United team that, listen, I don't know much about Eric Ramsey. I think the future is bright, but like what you do worry about, when you're undefeated like this, is smelling yourself a little bit. And then when you run into a Union team, and look, the Union themselves, like we don't know what we're going to expect. Like, are we going to get like that Portland team, or are we going to get that team that drew the first 3 matches of the season? Like, that's what we don't know. One thing we do know, Renee, is if they go out there and they play intense and they are structured right defensively, it's going to be extremely hard to beat them. I think the Union will get the dub here. I got a 2-0 victory here.
What?
And I think some guys are gonna need to shut us up, right? Like we just talked about Gazdag. And by the way, I just want to mention this. We all know how hard it is to PKs, right? Like he does
Oh
it at a high
gosh, I
pace.
cooked them. Definitely.
They're not easy. But when you're the number 10 here for this team in this type of system, we need you to create not only for yourself, but for others. And by the way, 0 assists as a number 10 is wild too, okay?
That's not good.
That's absolutely wild. But yes, I think it's going to be a fun afternoon in Subaru Park. I got the Union winning 2-0 here.
All right, I like it. So Minnesota has had a 2-1 win over Austin, 1-1 tie with the defending champs Columbus. They beat Orlando 3-2. There were red cards in that game. It was intense. And, of course, most recently they beat LAFC 2-0. So they've given up goals in every game except for the last game where they shut out LAFC. This team is special. This team is, I'm not going to say I've watched Minnesota nearly as much as the Union, but I'm excited for this matchup. I do think, though, and not to be homerish, because last week I picked against the Union. I thought they were going to lose. So just to put that out there, I do think the Union win this one like 2-1. Okay. I could see this being a very tight game. I feel like both teams offensively have the firepower to score. I feel like it's going to be a really good game of two similar teams, especially if the Union can bring the Portland level of aggression and movement and defending as a unit and just all over interchanging, be more dynamic. 2-1.
2-1. All right.
I'm going with.
All right. Well, you heard it here. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. So so Saturday afternoon, make sure you guys check it out. We'll be back next week. We'll be back on Monday. Our Mondays are not going to change. We'll be back on Monday. We'll be talking about this matchup. And Renee, first off, we'll enjoy the Union match, but it's a big week. It's a big week for PHLY Phillies. So enjoy
It is. One minor change, though. We're actually going to be kicking off our shows a little bit earlier on Monday, starting this upcoming Monday. Much like the game will be at 2 o'clock on Saturday, we'll be 2 o'clock on Monday. So
I like that.
You guys will be able to get our show live each and every Monday, 2 o'clock. We may have to tweak our schedule at some points depending on, what's going on with the Phillies, the Flyers at PHLY. With our job keeps us busy. So we'll always keep you up to date on the show times and what you can expect. And as always, for JP and myself, have a great rest of your day. Let's go Union. I know we've got our press conference with Jim Curtin coming up Friday afternoon. So depending on when people watch this, it may be before or after that. True. So we'll get more details from Jim about the team. And most importantly, let's go Union. Saturday, 2 p.m., another chance to get points, a chance to knock off one of the last remaining undefeated teams across MLS play and to solidify themselves as one of the last remaining unbeaten teams. So for us here at PHLY Union, we'll see you Monday, 2 p.m. live.